I was in Miami 4 years. It was great.
Oh yeah, that might be cool. Orlando, I'm close to Orlando. A little more family oriented. So I like it.
Yeah. Where did you say?
Orlando.
Oh, Orlando. Yeah, way up north.
The shop is in Deltona, so I'm at the top actually. But
Yeah.
Some of those flags all of a sudden we can't get.
With that, we're live. Welcome, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're joining us from. Wednesday, it's time for Light 'em Up. This week, we're still kind of a bit messy with our timings because of the recent time change that has happened in the US, and we only have it in Europe, I think, this Sunday. So this week, still coming to you, folks in the US at 3 p.m. Eastern. Next week, we're back to our regular 8 p.m. Central European time, 2 p.m. on the East Coast. But it's a pleasure to see everybody. It's good to have our friends, family, regular joining us here via Zoom. Everybody watching us on Facebook live stream. Thanks for chiming in. Always good to see all of you. If you have questions during the show, please make yourselves heard underneath the live stream. Put your thoughts, your comments, your questions into the comment section underneath the video stream. And without further ado, it's a pleasure, a privilege, and an honor to welcome tonight's guests, Mike Szymankiewicz, joining us live from the Cigar Hustler office podcast studio. We'll talk about the many different hats that you're wearing, Mike, all the way from cigar retail, the media side, wholesale distribution, all the way to brand ownership. What an exciting career, what an exciting endeavor you've built for yourself and your family. It's good to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
thanks for having me. A pleasure, privilege, and an honor. Oh my goodness, that sounds like a lot. I mean, yeah, okay, thanks. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
Well, of course, and kudos to you, the man who built it. Let's dive right in. There's so many things we want to talk about, and so many different things to dissect and dive into. I mentioned the multiple hats that you're wearing, but first and foremost, because we're a global platform, we have a lot of people chiming in from Europe, Africa, the Middle East, Asia. For those who haven't heard of Mike Szymankiewicz, give us a little bit of the inside baseball on how you actually got hooked with cigars, how you started. I know you were in the gas station business initially.
Yes.
So how did that happen from gas station to cigar retail?
It's not as fancy a story or dreamy as you think it would be. For me, I'm just a guy that always looks to kind of fill a need, and when I hone in on something, I go nuts. So we opened this store, and we were going to do a tattoo parlor because I figured there's good margins in tattoos, and the city wouldn't let us do it, but people came walking in asking for cigars. It used to be a cigar store. So my brother's my partner. We started building, and we started saving every penny, every dollar that came in. We continued to buy more cigars and just kind of build and build and build. And then, I got this crazy idea that I was going to build a website. I did that, and that's been pretty successful. And, that was really kind of the beginning for me as getting into the cigar industry. Now I smoke a lot of cigars. I smoke a lot of cigars every day, and I'm highly opinionated on it. So we have this podcast that does pretty well. It's got some pretty good rankings as of late. It's because I think it's got a really good platform, and it's just kind of honest. So, and we're not really beholden to anybody as far as ad space is concerned, which I think that some people can, believe that there's biased opinions when it comes to something like that. So yeah.
I know that feeling. It might be tempting. I mean, we've never done any advertisements here on Light 'em Up because we wanted to keep this community first. We wanted to keep this cigar family and just share the love and the information with everybody out there. But what was that first moment when the bee stuck, and when you got infected with that virus of the cigar lifestyle and the whole culture around it, because I get it. I mean, you try to set up a business, you have that history with the location, people ask for cigars, and you figure, well, this could be something interesting here, but we all know it's a whole different animal once you actually get into the lifestyle, once you get to learn to love the culture and everything that's mystical about the cigar world.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything mystical about it at this point in the game. I've been doing it for 13 years. The mystical is long gone. But I think what happened for me is, people came in and started buying cigars. So I started looking into it thinking, okay, well, there's got to be something to this. The people obviously like doing this. So I need to smoke some cigars. So I think I started with like an acid blondie or an acid Cuba Cuba, I was like, oh, this is cool. And then that day I was like, ooh, I feel lightheaded. This is amazing. This is awesome. I need to smoke another one to keep the lightheaded going. So I moved right to a Casa Magna. So that was the cigar that back in the day was like the cigar of the year. And it was a great value cigar for what it was. So, but it was bold. It was very strong. So I almost died. I vomited everywhere. And that could have been the beginning of the end for the cigar industry for me. But I decided to stick it out, and I'm like, okay, I got to go back to the drawing board. I got to learn more. I got to understand all of these things. And that was really kind of the beginning point for me. So that's really where I started off. I mean, it's entertaining, and it's very easy to not to quit right at that point, I guess, and say, you know what, I'm just going to sell these. I want nothing to do with it. But I just kind of felt the need to keep going. I enjoyed the taste. I enjoyed the way it made me feel. Unfortunately for me at this point, I couldn't tell you if a cigar was strong or not, because they no longer affect me. I have no, I'm just so accustomed to it at this point that there's, is it a strong cigar? I'm like, I don't know, maybe, I guess if I starved myself and then I smoked a cigar, maybe I would feel a difference. But at this point, you're just smoking it for flavor and kind of relaxation. So.
Mike, when I said mystical, and I sometimes use that word because it never stops to fascinate me how cigars, unlike any other product that I've experienced, and I do come from the wine and spirits world and the hospitality side of things, and there you see a lot of people with a lot of passion, no question. But I have never seen anything like the premium cigar industry, where people from all walks of life come together and you meet strangers in a cigar lounge or bar. And at the end of the evening, or at the end of your cigar that you share, you have a connection. And sure, it's something that I haven't experienced with any other product or industry, truly. And that's what still fascinates me so much. And I was curious when you said after 13 years, there's nothing mystical about it anymore, yeah, right? Do you still feel, well, there's something particular here, or would you say it has lost kind of that romanticism a little bit?
I would say that it has lost a little bit of the romanticism, that's for sure. I agree with you 100%. And you're absolutely, totally accurate with what you're saying. Having the ability to meet people in so many different walks of life is definitely the most remarkable part of this industry. And that's something that I'm extremely grateful for, because, I have this crazy thing that I always want to help someone. If they talk to me about something, I want to hook them up with the right person if I know that person, and really kind of make them flourish, right? So, and sometimes that's all it takes is, you're just one phone call away. You have this passion and this thing going, but you don't know what to do in the next step. Well, I might know that guy, right? Or even it could be something even simpler than that. You could be in a situation where, I don't know, lightning has struck your tree and you don't know how to you can't afford to get rid of your tree. And there might be somebody sitting in the lounge says, I can do that for you. Don't worry about it. So, those are just kind of two examples that happen all the time. Right. So yeah, you're right. That I would say, if anything keeps me interested in this industry, it is definitely the networking and the meeting of people that you don't see in any other industry. That is totally true. Totally true.
along that journey and during all those years and 2 decades in the industry, what were some of the things that kind of caught you by surprise, or that were something you didn't expect when you started out with this whole thing? And kind of a second part to the question is, all these steps that you have taken, it seems very, very logical, and almost like there's a lot of reasoning and methodology behind it and strategic thinking. Is that the way you operate, or was it more like it kind of happened one after the other, more accidentally than strategically?
I think the biggest surprise to me in this industry, and metaphorically speaking, is how many times I've been punched in the face. There have been numerous scenarios where I've had bigger retailers come and suppress me for product. You get struck across with people that are extremely egotistical when you're just trying to have a conversation with them, and you're kind of taken aback. And I've always seen, like, as many good people there are in this industry, there's definitely some bad people, right? People that don't want to see people succeed. So what has happened with me over the course of time is the things that I have built have just kind of been answers to me getting punched. Like, I created my own cigar because I wanted something that nobody else could control.
Mhm.
Nobody could dictate to me how many of this cigar I'm going to get, and I can share it with anybody who I wanted to. So when it started, it kind of created its own being. Like, I made it for me. And then other retailers that were friends of mine say, well, we want it too. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll sell it to you as well. Now it's to a point where if I create something that's limited, and it's so limited that all these other retailers want it, and I don't have enough for me, they get it first. I don't touch it, right? Because I will not be the guy. I refuse to be the person that brought me to where I'm at, right? And then same with the podcast. Like, I wanted to have a platform where I could be open and vocal about my opinions of what's going on in the industry and what I see and my perspective on things without anybody having the ability to shutter it, right? So, and yeah, it's really funny, and we have a great time on the podcast. We really do. It's the highlight of the week for me. It makes us $0. Like, we do ad space every once in a while for people that are outside of the industry. I mean, it just gets absorbed into this business for cameras and lights and, monthly subscriptions for Podbean or whatever. But we love doing it. So, and again, the notoriety, and because of that, it's really developed into this monster where it's highly acknowledged in the industry, so much to the point where it's kind of funny to me. It's like, this is just kind of a passion project where I wanted to be able to speak on my own and not be held back. So, those things have just kind of happened and developed over time. And, I don't have a game plan. I'm not that guy. I don't have a 20-page business platform of anything. My joke is I'm the jump off the cliff guy and build the plane on the way down, and we're going to figure it out, so I have a good time doing that. It's scary as hell sometimes, but at least I feel something. I want to have that feeling that I have no choice and I have to make progress. So,
and what's interesting, and I'm sure you realized this and experienced it throughout your career, when you do you, when you are at peace with the way you behave, the things that you build, when you follow your heart and your passion intuitively, but with honesty and integrity, other people will follow, right? And people will cling on to that and realize this guy is real. It's not about being friends with everybody necessarily. And you mentioned there's challenges every other day, and there's even weird people in the industry that we all consider to be the best industry in the world, right? But if you stick to who you are and you follow your innermost gut feeling and heart, then other people will realize, oh, there's something, and they jump on it. And that's what fascinates me.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. But you're 100% accurate. You've been in this game for a little bit too now, though. at this point.
Yes, and indeed. And as I said, I mean, I do come from the wine and spirit and hospitality world, and I see a lot of similarities there. Most people in the cigar industry, they're heavily into food, drinks, and just the finer things in life in general.
Yeah.
And the passion element certainly is there as well. And
Yeah.
so I've kind of flirted with different worlds and industries for quite a while. But again, the cigar industry is what truly fascinated and captured me like no other before. And I can definitely see and understand when you say after a certain while it loses some of the romanticism, but I feel there's so many people in their 70s, 80s, even 90s who still hang in there because they just cannot let go of the leaf and this whole industry somehow.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not I don't do really anything else. Not because I have anything against it. It's just that I don't know. It just wasn't really for me. So cigars have really turned into my habit. So I enjoy experiencing flavor profiles. I enjoy breaking down a cigar and determining what I think its value is, or what did they do wrong, what did they do right, what's amazing about it, what's not. So those things are definitely always intriguing to me.
How do you translate all of that into the way you operate your retail? And I have to add to that, over on Facebook, we just had a comment from one of our viewers who said the customer service at Cigar Hustler is just off the charge. Stephen Wells said that. So
He's a great dude.
That's a wonderful statement. And with everything that you described, how do you factor that into the way you operate, how you welcome people when they come to the shop, and then provide them with a memorable experience?
I think the simple aspect is it's not about me. A lot of retailers are quick to make it about them, where it's more about the customer. Now, if the customer wants to know my opinions on things, I'm more than happy to give them to them. And normally what happens, especially when something new comes in or products are being brought to market, I'll determine if I feel like that they're worthy or not, to come into the shop. But even then again, if Steven says, hey, I really want this cigar, I may bring it in blind without tasting it because I know that he likes it. Right. I have this horrible, my wife can attest to this horrible ability of always responding to everybody as fast as I possibly can. When it doesn't matter what time of the day or night it is, if it's an email or a Facebook message or whatever. Sometimes they get away from me. Sometimes there's a lot and I might miss one or two. But more often than not, I want to just talk right then and there. I want to discuss a situation and kind of figure out what I can do for them or whatever the case may be. So I think that really kind of is what made us always so successful, is to actually just care,
And I guess the same is true for the podcast as well. That's something that I realized very early on when you host something, when you have your own show or whatever. Too many people try to make it about themselves, and they try to be the star of the whole thing. Whereas it's completely the opposite. We're just vehicles. We're just a little platform to provide other people the opportunity to learn and to get to know the guest or just the topic at hand, right? And it's all too tempting to shine the spotlight on yourself and try to be the smart guy.
Sure. Absolutely. Not only that, but you really got to get to know a person. You could ask somebody the same question. Like you could go onto numerous shows and the same questions will be asked by the same person over and over again. And you're like, all right, I already know these, but when you kind of break a person down and you really kind of get them to open up, you get to understand their perspective and opinions on things. And some of the things that they've been through are just absolutely remarkable, So I know we recently did a podcast with my buddy from Caribbean Cigars in Miami. His name's Alan, and he has a different approach when it comes to tolerating customers that are, rough, I guess. and it's hilarious, but you wouldn't know these stories if he didn't tell you them. So I was like, hey, I called him. I said, I need to hear your stories on the podcast. I want you to bring them to light so that people understand some of the experiences that retailers have on a daily basis. Now, him being in Miami makes him even, take the situations that I deal with and multiply it by 100. I mean, he's got to deal with all shapes and sizes, all kinds of people. And it's pretty comical and how he deals with it. I mean, I wouldn't deal with it the way that he does, but I understand why he deals with it the way that he does, so it's pretty funny.
How would you deal with it though? And what are some of those experiences that stuck with you, or that you fondly remember, or not so fondly remember for all the wrong reasons?
I mean, the ones that the not so fondly remembers are usually ones that stick with you, and they're usually the funniest ones, right? So I remember interviewing a guy for a job, see if he wanted to come and work for us. And one of the questions that we asked him was like, how do you do on time, as far as, if you're supposed to be here at a specific time, is that going to be a problem? And he went like this to me. I'm like, what does this mean? That means you're not going to show up, or you may, I got a feeling that this isn't going to work out, And then he mentioned that he liked to drink a lot and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, so this, is he saying all these things because he wants to see that I'll put up with the abuse, or and hire him anyways, or he just doesn't want to work and he just showed up, that's definitely one that always is burned in my head. Another one would be, we had a guy, so we have a point system in our store. So as points are kind of accumulated in store only, we give away stuff. Like we may have special ashtrays made, or t-shirts, hats, whatever, So this guy, he came in and he said, hey, listen, I feel like I wasn't awarded the right points for my receipt. I feel like I was shorted on a cigar. So we're like, okay. So my brother looks at the cameras and looks at the transaction, and he watches him come into the shop, watches him go into the humidor, watches him go to the register. And for sure, he didn't receive the right points for the transaction. But what he failed to mention was that he stole a cigar when he was in the humidor. So my brother called him and said, yeah, you're right. The transaction was wrong. Please come in. So he came in, and I positioned myself at the door so he couldn't leave. And we politely told him, hey, yes, you are correct. The transaction was wrong. We're going to write that, and you were going to write for the transaction for you stealing out of the humidor. And he hemmed and hawed momentarily, but then he surrendered and paid. And we politely asked him to never come back. That's always kind of the part that's I can never fathom. I don't understand how a person tries to take advantage of, especially a small business, because everything, as the way the small business operates, it's all tight. It's all extremely tight. There's no Lamborghinis out front. There's no mansion up the street. We're paying our bills, and and you can afford to live, and you live a decent life after a while. But what's most important is taking care of your people, right? So you want to make sure that your employees are good. They're always satisfied, and you're doing everything for them, because if you don't have that mindset and mentality, your business is going to fail, right? So, taking advantage of an organization, a small company like that, at 8, 10, 15, 20 bucks a time, I mean, it could weigh on it heavily and fast. So whenever those opportunities come by, we always like to make sure that they're rectified as quickly as possible.
As a small business owner and as a retailer with such a strong brick and mortar presence, how do you see the role of the cigar retailer in general? Because I feel it's so much more than just a place where you go to buy cigars, right? You're pretty much everything from psychologist to best made and everything in between, right?
Sure. On a I bartended when I was a kid. So, on a psychological level, it's kind of the same segue, right? You listen to everybody's, whatever they're going through, good, bad, or ugly, And what's important is that you actually listen. And, I think that that's definitely a lost art. A lot of people don't. More often than not, they want to speak over you and tell you how they did it differently or something similar that they experienced or whatever the case may be. So if more people would just shut up and listen, I think that that makes a big difference, especially as being a retailer. The other things that kind of make this business fascinating for me is my wholesale level, building my own products. It's the most expensive thing I've ever done in my life. I don't know what else to tell you, it continues to grow on an annual basis. It really does. And it's a blessing and a curse, because at the end of the day, we don't take any money out of our wholesale operation because we just have to put more money in. Right. If you originally stroked the check for $60,000 and the next year you stroke a check for $120,000 and the next, and now you're stroking checks for $250,000 or $300,000, it's like, this is a lot of money in leaves, but in the grand scheme of things, you're literally this big in the industry. Right. So, but it's a lot of fun. It can be stressful. As of late, I did have this fun experience where my website crashed. And the customer service that I was dealing with from my serving company is just, I don't know what has happened, but I've dealt with them for 11 years, but they no longer wish to help for the most part. So I was really kind of at a point where I've been working on a website on the back end to launch this new one, and it wasn't ready yet. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess it's time to jump off the cliff again, right? And we're just going to move forward with the new one. And that's been kind of fun and exciting too. So I don't know, there's so many things, there's so many things going on. There's so many things that are interesting and stressful, but I guess there isn't anything else I'd rather do for the most part,
Also, what's interesting is I feel that the more you look at the industry from various different angles, it always changes your perception and changes the role that you had in the first place. How would you say that venturing into the wholesale and distribution side, plus manufacturing or brand owning, has transformed the way you see the retail operation and how you work?
Happily tell you the way that I view retailers now is totally different. It's how I used to view them. And I would say that for every one good retailer, there's probably 8 or 9 that aren't worth it. They're either egotistical or they don't handle their operation. They don't clean their lounges. They don't take care of their employees. Financially, their cards are always declined, and yet they're still arrogant. They have drapes that are from 1970 that are plaid, and I'm just, or whatever the case may be. I'm fortunate enough to where I don't have to deal with those people. I don't care how much money at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they're worth to me financially or not. It's just, are you a good person? Are you a good person? Are we going to enjoy ourselves having a conversation, or is this just going to be uncomfortable for me? Then if it is, I don't really want to sit and talk with you. So that, I think, was a huge learning curve for me, because I thought that everybody was like me. I thought that everybody was kind of cool, and you quickly learn that that's definitely not the case. Like, of course, maybe some of your big dogs, maybe they were kind of egotistical. All right, whatever. If they're moving a ton of sticks, maybe they've earned that. Maybe, maybe you have to believe that to some degree in order to be that level of successful, but you can still be a good person. I would say that that's definitely the biggest thing is realizing how many retailers aren't, in my opinion, decent.
The wholesale and distribution side of the industry, I feel, is one that is less often covered on shows like ours and all the cigar media platforms. Yes, it's probably less obviously interesting or important to the end consumer because it doesn't have all the romanticism of the leaf and the growing operations, the cigar rolling and manufacturing, or the retail end, which is the end consumer facing part. The wholesale distribution side is kind of in the middle and less charming, right? Though I
Right.
feel it's so critically important, as every element of the whole supply chain and food chain there is important. Why do you think those are sort of the unsung heroes? But what are the things about it that are critically important and you feel a game changer for the industry, because that's where you can really add a lot of value?
Well, I think on the wholesale or side or manufacturing side, if you will, I think that that's kind of the man behind the curtain, right? Um, there's a lot of things that can go wrong on that side. You know, for one, if you're not working with a good factory, you know, you can easily find yourself in a situation where the cigar that you originally created is not the cigar that you received, but they took all your money. If you find the good manufacturer that makes the good cigar for you, is there a plug ratio? Is that ratio higher than the average? You know, obviously yours is globally, you guys have accepted a higher plug ratio than the United States, right? I mean, on average, I think that ours is about 3%, whereas Cuban cigars, I think, are about 30%, right? So, you know, you want to make sure that the ratios, that the cigars are being produced well, that the cigars sit at the right time. And not only that, you got to make sure that your bands are correct, right? And that your bands lined up and they match and the colors match, the boxes fit the right amount of cigars, and that artwork is done, and that those cliches match, and that all of these things, like, you are hoping that you're putting together a symphony, right? And you got to make sure that everybody is moving on the same page to produce the product, right? I think that a lot of that gets lost. You know, what's kind of funny though is if you're in the industry long enough, you see the things that come to market that have the mistakes that your average consumer won't pick up on. You know, I've seen things that are slightly offset on color, or, you know, a band that overlaps a little bit too much or whatever. And then I'll ask the guy, like, was this a mistake? And he's like, yeah, but what did you want me to do, bro? There's no, you know, we were so far along at this point. You know, I have 200,000 sticks ready to go. It is what it is. We were launching. I'm like, I get it, man. I get it. You know, my cigars, like, I'm fortunate to work with who I work with. I really love the guys. They're my family, and they've always taken really good care of me. But there's a trade-off. Like, I know that if we're expecting to have cigars in November, it might not be November. It might be February, it might be March, could be April, could be May. And you know what? I'm not the guy that will look to them and say, well, you said it's going to be on this date. What's going on? Like, I know what's going on. Everything is going on, and they're doing their best to make sure that it all comes together. So, you know, that's the part of, like, when you said, you know, mystical, that's really kind of removed. You know, when you go to Nicaragua or you go to Cuba or you go to Honduras and you go on one of these factory tours, the first time it's amazing, right? It's like a theme park. Like, this is awesome. I smoke as many cigars as I want. I have, you know, I get to drink. We have someone cook for us every night. You know, we build friendships. All of these things are cool, right? And then you might do it a second time, and it might lose a little bit of that magic, but it's still a good experience. And then you may want to say, well, now I'm going to go out on my own and make something, or learn a little bit more. And then you kind of experience all of these things that are going on in the cigar industry. You're like, wow, nothing happens right away. Sometimes these things aren't done right. And, you know, there's a lot of people that are happy to take your money. So you kind of learn quickly, or go broke, what you can and cannot do. So, you know, that magic is kind of removed, right?
I think to a certain degree, yes. On the other hand, probably that's just because I'm a geek and I love those little details. When you talk about all that, even the challenges and the hurdles and the bands not being aligned there, and the color sorting not being spot on, and all these little shitty things that as a young and up and coming brand you might tap into. You know, I think that's so fascinating, and that makes it even more charming, because it's real, it's honest, and the cigar is one of the very few remaining truly handmade products that's so outdated and so far off everything that the world screams at the moment, you know, with chat GPT and everybody being online 24/7. You know, the cigar seems so out of place.
Yeah.
but yet I feel it's the perfect product for our time. And
Sure.
and that human touch to it, and that those slight imperfections, that's kind of what makes it so fun, I feel, and so special, because every single time you take a cigar in your hand, you cut it, you light it, you enjoy it, it's unique.
So true. So true. Though, but those imperfections, they don't just happen on a small level. I've seen them on a big level too. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the
Very
size of the
true.
company. You can look at things like, oh man, and that's just a bigger, at that point, you're talking about make or break Q1 EBITDA, or so, it's like we have to release the cigar where it's not, they're okay with, yes, there are imperfections or whatever the case may be on, marketing products or whatever, but that's, and again, most consumers don't even see that. They don't even pick up on it. I mean, you as the geek that you are, you probably do without question, but most guys are like, hey, the cigar tastes good. I was really excited. I'm glad it came out,
And I understand not everybody wants to like deep dive into all the behind the scenes of the industry. Some people, they just walk in, they spend $7, $10, $12 on their cigar, whatever, and they want to have a wonderful hour of a break from their life, and they're not interested in why it's so difficult for a manufacturer to align bands or color sort cigars or whatever.
Right.
So that perfectly understood. And if you put down your hard-earned money to purchase a cigar, you want it to behave and perform and give you all the pleasure you expect. So without a doubt, those little imperfections cannot be an excuse for not delivering. But still, it keeps that kind of very human, very natural thing to it.
So true.
And so, speaking of the manufacturing side, well, you have the pleasure of working with the Nicaragua, and I guess nowadays a lot of people would love to probably have cigars manufactured there. You started with them earlier in the process, and you've been with them ever since. I know you have a special connection with Skip Martin and all the folks there. How is it like to work with those people, with Esteban and the entire team? And why would you say it's a special place to have cigars manufactured, and you'd rather be there than anywhere else?
It's remarkable. Esteban's no longer there. Skip Martin he pretty much is handling the daily operations, and Michael Rosales is handling the majority of the sales on this side, of the pond or whatever. What's amazing about those guys is they're honest, they're open, and I feel like there's a lot of BS in this industry, and they only give me a little bit of BS. As politely to say it, there's no, when I wanted to make something, Skip said, okay, well, look, here's the tobacco that we have, start tasting it, like start learning it, and a lot of people don't necessarily do that. They'll give you an idea as to something, and then you can kind of put something together, but it's not in the same concept. It's not in the same depth, and not only that, but if I had an idea and they thought it was a terrible idea, they would tell me this is a terrible idea.
Mm.
Whereas other people would be like, yeah, no problem. Sure. I love that. Let's do that. So it's like the one of the first statements Skip ever said to me was, hey, I'm going to throw you in the pool, but I'm going to make sure you have like the floaties. And I don't want you to drown. Right. So having that ability and getting kind of entrenched into it really made things extremely beneficial to me. And not only that, I know that they consistently make a great product. I know that they consistently deliver. So I would never, ever want to deviate off of that. And I would never want to mess with that recipe. Right. So I get all the perks of, understanding tobacco from one of the smartest guys I know, working and developing something. And believe me, we disagree on flavor profiles all the time. If he thinks something's terrible, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to change my cigar. I may still love that cigar. It's just doesn't fit him. But he's going to tell me how he feels, and then the other aspect too is working with Michael Rosales on the other side, and how he has cultivated relationships with retailers, the good ones, and how to kind of develop and grow, and then finding the other good guys along the way, and continuing to establish those relationships. Those are things that a lot of people wouldn't teach anybody. They don't want to show you. Maybe they do want to show you, but they don't have the time, or they don't want to put in the effort, and because it requires a lot of things, right? So those guys have always been great to me. They've always taken care of me. They've always been honest with me. They've always told me the things that not necessarily that I want to hear, but I need to hear. And I'm very fortunate to have those guys in my life. They're my family.
Mhm. Great to hear. When it comes to the supply of the tobaccos and the raw materials that you have access to for the brands that you're developing, how did that evolve over time? Because usually you don't start your own cigar brand and then the manufacturers or the tobacco people will give you access to all the filet mignons and the beautiful cuts and their best pieces, obviously. How was that for you in the beginning, and how has it evolved ever since?
It's always been the same. The sourcing of the raw material has always been on the end of Nica Sueño. I mean, you could, I know that a lot of people will say to individuals that they can identify polones and types of tobacco and the grade of the tobacco, and that they've been doing it for years. And I really believe that the reality is, if you haven't been entrenched on that side of the industry every day of your life since you were 5 years old, you're really not going to understand it, and there's always going to be somebody who's happy to take your money. Right. So I lean on those guys to identify what they feel is good raw material, and they have all of those things really acquired. Now, if there's something special that I want and that they don't have, they'll go out and source it for me. I wouldn't ever attest to saying that I'm that guy that has the ability to identify those things, because I'm not, and I believe in surrounding yourself with the guys that do, and leaning on those people that have that ability. So Skip has done a great job on the manufacturing side, as far as constantly having the right raw materials, sourcing the right raw materials. He's always going somewhere. He's always in the Dominican Republic, or just trying to build things, or have access to different types of tobacco, and getting it over to the factory. Now that they have a bodega where they house their own stuff, like on a bigger scale, it makes things even more accessible, and more, they're even a little more vertically integrated at this point. And I think that that's really kind of what every business leans towards doing, is an increase in vertical integration, controlling more of your outcome, controlling more of your profit margins, and always delivering a great product, and that's getting harder and harder, especially when it comes to Connecticut broadleaf as of late. So it's always been those guys. It's not me, it's them.
Are you sometimes happy that you don't have to worry about all those things that come with vertical integration, even though for a lot of people in the industry, it's kind of what they ultimately strive towards and would like to accomplish? But I also fondly remember kind of the opposite side of things, where Steve Saka once said in one of the interviews that, that's not his end goal. He'd rather have access to great raw material to work with, and just take those little filet mignons, as I said earlier, that he wants to work with, but not worry about if you Skip Martin, another analogy from one of the shows, he said, if talking about Drew Estate, if you want to do Liga Privadas, you have a certain amount of these, and then underneath you need a shit ton of underground to make that happen, and then underneath you have a whole other pile of even more product you need to put out in order to make the whole thing work, right? Just in terms of the raw materials and stuff and the resources.
That's so true. As far as I'm concerned, with when it comes to me and vertical integration, I don't feel like that aspect is something that I am glad that I don't have to do that over there. But the catch to that is, I do other things because I'm in a different position in this industry. My level of vertical integration is different. Making your own cigar makes you a little more vertically integrated. Owning the building makes you more vertically integrated. Expanding, to other consumers. Having an online presence makes you, like all of these things, having your own podcast, those are all kind of forms of vertical integration that I deal with. Now if I was on the manufacturing side and that was my basis point, then yes, I would look to spread into those aspects. But you're again, you're right, it's extremely hard to do those things, especially in because it's a third world country. So I do my own vertical integration in some aspects. I'm just at a different, I'm starting in a different position. I hope to never get to that point. I just hope to continue to work with the guys that I work with, and and I'll happily pay them for their time and experience, instead of me going down there. And I'm a big family guy. I like being around my kids and my wife all the time. I don't, I hate leaving, and I leave. I go and I do events. You do PCA. We just did the Great Smoke with Abe and went to go check that out, because he's a good guy. But I don't like to go for long periods at a time. When you travel, if I had that, I would be gone. I would be in Nicaragua all the time, man. So
I'm with you. Mike, when you started with your first cigars, I believe you put your first own brand into the market like 2015 or something, close to that. So it's been a couple of years now. You did the first one primarily for your own store, then started to expand and build this whole thing. When you developed your first blends together with the folks down at Nicaragua, what was the approach? What was the idea behind it? Did you have a certain profile in mind that you wanted to work towards? Was it something that you felt was missing in the market and you wanted to fill a void there? What was the rationale behind the first blends that you ultimately came up with?
What's really kind of interesting is, if I was creating a cigar to fill the need in the market, then I would have made something totally different than what I made. What I was really leaning towards was I wanted to make a cigar that I loved and enjoyed, and I knew nothing about it. So what was amazing, it was just a blank slate. So as I'm kind of, putting cigars together, it was a lot of fun, because I made a cigar that tasted like Habano, right? And it didn't taste like anything else, and then I got the explanation as to why it didn't have the flavor profiles that I was looking for, right? So you make some modifications, and then I made a cigar that I'm like, this is amazing. I really like the cigar. I can't wait to see what it looks like after it's, sat for 12 weeks, because there's particular tobaccos that are very sharp that mellow relatively quickly. And, identifying what those are and what they're going to taste like later on, you have to learn that as you progressively continue to do, taste. I guess blending, right? So, the cigar that I had originally created is still the cigar to this day that I smoke every day, and that was the original Habano. I'm smoking it right now. I smoke the Habano Toro every day. The broadleaf, my brother blended, and we only had intentions of making one cigar, but, brothers being brothers, we argue about who makes the better cigar. So we wound up releasing both, I smoke the broadleaf now too, just as much as I smoke the Habano. So
just to piss him off.
yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, you made a good cigar too, but it's a smaller one. I usually smoke the Bellicoso. It's not as, the Toro's the better one for me as far as the Habano. So his is still, it's good, but it's not, the whole size isn't as good. So, but yeah, that's really, I didn't try and fill a void at all. I tried to fill the void that I needed for me,
As a retailer, do you feel that there could be even something like a void in the cigar industry? Because you'd probably argue as with music, at some point everything has been made, created, developed.
Yeah. I couldn't tell you what that need is, to be honest, because most consumers leave here happy. They leave content with what they have, they're looking for something. They don't, they always want to try something new, right? So finding what that is, that's successful can be difficult, because, you have three different types of consumers, right? You have your consumers that'll smoke the same Romeo and Julieta until the day they die, right? You have your consumers that like to try the newer stuff, and maybe they have 2 or 3 cigars in their regular rotation. They continue to smoke a couple things as they kind of go in, and then sometimes they may rotate something in or out. And then you have your bundle guys. You have your guys that are looking for the value cigar that, they just want to have something that they can smoke 3 or 4 a day, whether they're cutting the grass, they're out on the patio, they're driving in their truck, whatever. Those are your 3 major consumers. And I think ironically, your biggest consumer of the 3 is the bundle guy. Right. So I think that if you're going to ask me what I think would be the biggest need, is always finding the best quality bundle for that consumer.
Great point. One other aspect that I wanted to ask you in regards to the manufacturing, your portfolio, and kind of what's behind the cigar. You have named your cigars always as sort of a reference or a reminiscence of people that are close to you, people that have inspired you. What do you think is in the name of a cigar anyways? From retail experience, but also as a brand owner yourself, how important do you think it is to pick the right name for a cigar, for your brand, or just a line?
I think it's extremely important. It's part of the magic, of the mysticalness of it, if you will. If it's not something that's connected to a meaning, then it's not easily relatable. If it isn't easily relatable, then a consumer may try it once and they probably won't come back to it. Like, we're all looking for the perfect blend, the perfect marketing, the perfect packaging, the perfect meaning for a cigar, for it to explode and become extremely successful. Right. So it's extremely important. And I think that when you put your heart into it and it has that meaning, it's received extremely well. Right. Everybody wants to make one that's got 7 cents it's funny because like that's always been something that's kind of been brought back to me is, guys who I've worked with in the past too, or have been close with, I'm like, I have this horrible, I speak how I feel, and like sometimes that comes across as, someone might take that the wrong way, but it's not because I want to hurt a person. It's because the opposite. I want to see them succeed. So, and I have learned from my friends that, being honest and having your approach is really important, because you don't want to see somebody go down a road where they're making this jejune kind of boring, it's already been done before, same name, different concept cigar, and then it totally flops. Right. So I've upset many of friends because of that. And, they have changed. Some of them have made modifications, and then I've watched some of them just totally disappear into the industry and just bleed out. So it's got to have heart. It's got to have heart. If it doesn't have heart, it's not worth doing.
Amen. Let's bring a couple of questions from our beloved audience. Macy, you've been patiently waiting for some of your questions to be put forth. So chime in, buddy. Thanks for joining us, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
That's Macy, right? Not Mace.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
go for
first
it.
of all, I hate to say this, but I would like, I put in the comments earlier a long rambling, as I've been known to do. I would be interested in Mike's. And nice to meet you, Mike. I'm Macy in Mississippi. Hello. Love your show. Actually, I'm a lawyer being sued and got stuff in Palm Beach County. Was there last week working on that. Now you're down in Miami County, right?
I'm actually just outside of Orlando in Deltona.
Oh, I am completely wrong. Central Florida, even better. Okay, never mind. I'll try to get sued in that jurisdiction so I can
Yeah, if
come.
you can get
see
sued
you
here,
more.
that'd be much better. That'd be much.
Yeah, well, I will say that anyway. It's interesting down there. I'll just leave it. That's a whole. We don't have enough time for that.
Yeah.
Your stories about cigar shops in Miami actually reminded me. I was in the old across from El Titan de Bronce, the old La Gloria Cubana factory, which is now a store. And this dude came in a Northwestern University business shirt, seemed very professional. I'm like, wow, well educated, and started going on this rant and all that about something being wrong and like a conspiracy. And I'm laughing, thinking like, okay, it's an inside joke. Turns out like he's a local nut job that comes in, tries to like just like screw people out of boxes of cigars and other stuff. They all know. I mean, it was so your story is confirmed by I was sitting there smoking a Plasencia Alma del Campo, having a nice afternoon, and it was nuts. The guy was like, I know I mean it. So you gave me a flashback.
Yeah.
So true. But my passion is Colombian tobacco. My wife's I'm actually going on Friday to visit some I passion project. I'm a lawyer, but I got this dream of bringing Colombian puros to the world. And I actually want to grab, I've actually got one of your cigars. I was at Puro Sabor. I was on the Nica Sueño tour, and Skip handed me one of your cigars. So I'm going to smoke that later this afternoon. It's one of your Connecticut's. And I just got to back up. Skip Martin's probably the most honest person. And it was unbelievable the stuff he was telling us on that tour.
Yeah.
Should have recorded it. Maybe that's why it was he was honest. But so I anyway, I think you're also really honest guy. I appreciate that. And I think that's tough. I mean, one of my questions is about media, and like now Half Wheel's getting so dominant, and I think they do a pretty good job of keeping things. My concern is not really that stories are being suppressed in the sense that, you know, something like that's going on, or like, oh, we don't want to say anything bad because of a relate. I think what's happening more is just stories aren't being looked at, like the inside baseball stuff we love. Everyone's just doesn't really want to report or talk about that, because if you make the wrong people mad, it can upset your business. And that's what folks, even from, I'll just say it, from Half Wheel, other places, have flat out told me. Because I've said, when you do this investigative editorial stuff, it's so interesting. And last week, there was talk, Nick Libretti was talking about the Pichardo, Lucian, all that thing. And we all know their story. That's probably going to lead to litigation. But like, who's going to cover that? First of all, who's going to tell you about it in this industry? Who's going to cover it? You're going to, like, people get so angry. You're right. I mean, like, we all want one thing. If the cigar industry wants more stories to be told, we all have to have thicker skin, because as much machismo as there is in the industry, there's a lot of people with really thin skin when there's, and that's just not how that works. But anyway, so on top of that, there's, I would like to hear your thoughts on factories you visit. You talk about people wanting to take your money. I'm about to be one of them. Can you give me some tips or things with what you know now? Like, hey, if I were starting over visiting factories, Skips or someone else's, like, here's what I would look for with what I want now. I like, are you doing this with the tobacco? Is it low fermentation temperatures? Is it like, can you point out some actual specific things on, like, here, you know, some things I would look for, because here's places where they're cutting corners, not skipping them, but in general, because I think with what you've done, you are uniquely qualified to answer that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there are some companies that will cut corners, as far as cooking tobacco or painting tobacco or some of those things, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that they're making a bad cigar, but it may not be the same value as to what you're paying, right? So, you got to kind of have a good sense as to what the value is of a cigar, and if you enjoy that flavor profile, even if those things have been modified, right? One of the greatest lessons that Skip has ever taught me is to never put yourself in a position where you can get screwed, right? It doesn't matter about the paperwork, as you know, as being an attorney. It's very easy for you to make sure that your chess pieces on the board are in the position where you can't get screwed over, right? So as long as you do those things, the cigar, and you have some trust with the manufacturer that you're working with, you'll be able to produce a great cigar, when they're made, break it down. Like, okay, if you're making a Toro, you Google it. First of all, you can say, what's the average weight of a Toro cigar, right? Get a scale and weigh a bunch of them, right? If they're coming in light, you're getting screwed, right? First off. Second off, how's the wrapper feel? Is it thin? Is it thick? Right? It might be thin if it's a Connecticut shade wrapper, like those things, that's kind of a given. But if it's a Habano wrapper, or if it's a broadleaf wrapper, if it's some of these San Andreas, that wrapper should be thick, right? So is it thick? Are they all matching the same color in the box? Are they painted? All of those things you need to figure and then assess how much you're paying for the cigar. Now, you also have to consider that what you pay in that factory isn't your total valuation of the product. You got to pay TTB, you got to pay shipping, it's got to get landed. If you're not handling the distribution, you're going to pay the distributor, so all of those other aspects need to be considered as well. So when you're doing something, make sure that you find a factory that you know and you trust, and then always trust but verify, and never put yourself in that position where you can get screwed.
So, quick follow. What's typical in payment? Do you see typically like pay half for an order and then you get it delivered, pay the other half? What have you typically seen on that?
Yeah, that happens more often than not. I mean, sometimes you can have factories that'll give you terms. You can have a factory say, "Hey, listen, we're and then they're in the position where you can screw them, right?" So I prefer to be in that position. If someone hands me that, I will take that position. But now, like the relationship that I have with Skip is totally different, right? They ask for half and then they ask for half later. But, if I have it, I'm giving it to them. I'm not, I don't slow roll those guys at all. I know all the things and the visions that they have as a company and what they look to achieve. And I always look to be a contributing factor to that, when Skip was really sick, back a few years ago, I mean, I was looking for dialysis machines to try and get to him. I could just to try and help. I couldn't figure out what I could do. I'm not the guy that's like, well, I found the solution, but it's going to cost you, and having those relationships are important, because I could trust Skip with $1 million of my money. I could give it to him. I could have no product on this side of the pond at all. And I know that my $1 million isn't going to disappear. So, having those relationships are super important. But before you have those relationships, make sure that you're never in the position where somebody could take your lunch.
You want to say thank you? That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Dude, I'm a phone call away. If you have any other questions or whatever, please reach out to me at any time.
I'll be hitting you. You'll be getting Sam. Don't worry. I'll stalk you. Don't worry.
Sounds good. Hey, stock away, man. I got plenty of them. Bring it on. Bring it on.
Brian, I'm sure your hand kind of shut up as soon as the word chess was mentioned. Good to see you, my man. Thanks for chiming in.
Hey, you too. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you have an exciting question for Mike as well.
Do I? I don't know. I wasn't going to ask anything, and then you mentioned chess. I don't know if you play or it was a nice metaphor.
I mean, it's generally a nice metaphor. I play, but I'm terrible.
Oh, okay.
Like I know the game. I can kick my son's ass. He's 10. But
There you go.
other than that, it is a great metaphor of life.
Yeah.
And that's what I find fascinating about that game, and you can break that down as, I mean, I'm sure you've heard it before. Your pawns are like your employees, your queen is your wife, and then the rest of the pieces are your friends. So, those pieces need to be important. All of those pieces need to be important, so.
Yeah, for sure. It's got a ton of great metaphors and life lessons in it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I can you hear the rain through the speaker? No. Oh, it's raining. I'm outside. I can't smoke indoors. So yeah, that's fascinating. That's really great. I wasn't so curious about. I was curious that there's a Daytona and a Deltona.
Oh yes, there is. It's this little town in between Daytona and Orlando, and it's all homes. there were these two brothers back in the day. They sold the dream of, hey, come to Florida. They marketed towards Puerto Rico and New York, come to Florida for cheap living. And they succeeded in that. It's probably 100,000 homes. There isn't a ton of stores or anything like that. The city commission's a little bit messed up, but we got a pretty good spot here, and we've taken it and really had a synergistic approach in building and developing. So yeah, this is Deltona, baby. It's I always joke and say it's the epicenter of the cigar industry.
That's great. It's not where NASCAR is going. The Deltona 500.
No, the Deltona 500. Yeah, that's about 25 minutes away. Yeah, the Daytona. Yeah,
that's cool. Yeah, when I started beating my dad at chess, he wouldn't play with me anymore. It's like, I'm not playing. He didn't like it. So I don't have anything too provocative. I'll just ask some simple questions. You were talking, or Reinhard had the question about the importance of the name of a cigar and a brand. So I was curious if you could go into yours. I was on the website, and then maybe I'll just give you the chance to kind of do a plug if you want. I was looking at the club membership, if you want to maybe say how that works.
So the name of my cigar is the core line's called Powstania, right? And that means uprising. I had retailers that suppressed me when it came to availability and product, and this was kind of a great way to attach myself. I'm Polish. My last name's 15 letters long. My father was an immigrant, so my brother and I are firstborn. I know a ton about the heritage? No. I could tell you there's a lot of things that I missed that, a lot of my grandparents had passed and, my dad's passed. But, a lot of people in the cigar industry will say that they're linked to Cuba or they're linked to Davidoff, and, I'm just neither one of those things, man. So I leaned into, my original culture. So that's really how it kind of formed. And it's kind of taken off, It's been very successful. I have no complaints. I have a lot of great retailers that I work with, and we continue to grow annually. My month club is the bane of my existence. It's this thing that I created where I look around the humidor and I say, "Ooh, that's good. Let's put that. This is new. Let's do that. Let's do this." And then I'm like, "How much money is this?" I'm like, "Okay, we're not making anything. We're losing a little bit on this month," or whatever the case may be. But it's like this passion project that just won't go away, and it continues to kind of grow, So I have a lot of fun with it. I had to raise my price $5 to $34.95 because I got the speech from my brothers like, "Look, man, we're losing too much money on this on an annual. If you look at the annual scope, it's a negative. So it has to at least break even or at least move somewhat into the profit section. And still to some months it doesn't. But I enjoy it. I have a lot of fun with it, and it's cool. It's cool, So we just forced this new site up. It's the new site, it's probably 80% to where it needs to be. But on the back end wise, we're looking that we had, when it was shifted over, there were some quantity issues, there were some pricing issues, and we're ironing out all those details kind of in a rush, which is entertaining. So we got my guys are working around the clock trying to solve as many problems as possible. But I'm glad that it happened the way that it did, to be honest. If my other website didn't crash, I don't think I would have ever pushed my new one to be up, because I was comfortable. It worked. I had, we have consistent business, and, sometimes you need that situation to happen in order for you to kind of level up. So I'm glad that it happened. It's just a pain in the ass as of right now.
Well, I'm going to make your problem bigger. I'm going to join.
All right. Sounds good, man. Sounds good.
It's five cigars?
Yep. 5 cigars.
Oh, that's great. Do we get yours?
Sometimes you will. I honestly will hold off on releasing mine. Sometimes I'll do it in December or something when I try and do something special. And that's only because I try to be as cognizant as possible as my other partners and retailers. I could make cigars and just release them in the month of, but I don't think that that's the best thing for the industry as far as where I'm sitting. I want to help everybody succeed and be profitable. and if you're a good person, you're doing the right thing. I want to do the right thing by them. So
Chest is very popular in Poland.
yeah, I know.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yep. Cheers.
Mike, just a quick fire question in between, because Wojciech is joining us on the Facebook live stream.
A bear?
he's driving,
The actual bear?
unfortunately. And he was curious if Powstania is planned to come to Europe anytime soon, or any plans for international expansion.
I would love to go international. I don't know if I can logistically do it. I've had correspondence with a couple people in Poland. They want to bring it to Poland. I would have to figure all of that out. I think that there's a huge potential for it. Not only for just because of what the brand is and what it represents, but also the way that you're seeing the Cuban market go. Its prices are shooting up through the roof, and I think that people are looking for alternatives. And now all of a sudden, with taxation and all these things, new world cigars are actually palatable as far as price point. So you just have to, as you know, in order for business to work, it has to be a scenario where everybody wins, right? Now, a lot of these guys that are more vertically integrated, ground up, they can afford to take hits on their pricing when they ship directly from that country and then absorb some of that tax cost, right? Now, I'm not that vertically integrated, so I can't absorb those taxes. Now, once it becomes a point where it's like, okay, we can accept these taxes, we can accept your pricing, and then we can move forward, then I have to figure out the logistics with Skip and say, okay, can we work it out where this is being shipped to Europe? So it's possible. I would love to do it. I just don't know how to get there yet.
Good answer. I also still wanted to briefly talk a bit more about the cigar media side of things, since you are part of it, but as you mentioned, your approach was kind of different, and you created the podcast for completely other reasons, and you've definitely found a niche and a place of your own, I feel, with the voice that you offer and the tone of the show, and that's greatly appreciated, I have to say. Now, as small or as big many of the cigar media platforms, podcasts, video shows and stuff might be, given the restrictions we all face in the industry of how we can communicate, market product, those platforms are all critically important for the ecosystem. Macy, I don't want to sound smart and ask some of your questions, but you had some excellent questions you put in the chat box, so maybe you want to bring forth some of them. But in general, Mike, I would just love to hear about your thoughts about the importance of the cigar media in terms of perpetuating that culture and the lifestyle and sharing some of the news bits and pieces, but also, and we discussed it in great length last week, where is like more of the editorial content? What can we do to enlarge the portfolio of cigar media beyond just copying the same old press releases on 20 different sites? So your thoughts on the cigar media complex there, and then Macy, please chime in whenever you feel.
Macy's making all kinds of faces and motions. I think that the podcasts are great. It's awesome to see them kind of grow and see the avenue as it kind of goes and develops, right? For me personally, I'm not really shy about the conflict when it comes to opinions, because I know that opinions may vary, and I know that I may upset some people, but it's fine. I think that if you want to make an omelet, you got to break a few eggs, right? And everybody has their own methods of doing things. I appreciate Half Wheel. I think that Half Wheel does a fantastic job. If you actually sit down with Charlie and you have a conversation with that guy, the stuff that he knows about the cigar industry, it's unparalleled. It's remarkable. And, he's an ass. He breaks my balls all the time, and vice versa. But I'll be the first to give him, respect when respect is due. I don't think that he has a biased opinion due to ad space. I think that sometimes, even though some of the reviews may come off like, that one doesn't make sense, I just think that happens. I've seen people say this cigar is the #1 cigar of the year, and I'm like, I don't even think you're close, man. Aficionado aside, because aficionado is going to talk about they're going to have the same 10 brands in rotation every year. It's come to this point where if you don't realize that now, then you're new to the cigar industry. I wouldn't even consider them media. What do I think about media? It's super important, and you do have to walk with eggshells in some cases, because we're the demons of tobacco, evil tobacco, where, drinking heavily and, and smoking weed and all of these things are more culturally acceptable. It's unfortunate, but you just got to be careful as to how you market as far as anything else. If you're in the cigar industry, you can talk about the cigar industry all you want. We have a Patreon show that we pay for, that it's a separate subscription, right? And people pay monthly for it. And normally it's a lot of people that just kind of support us, and they like to, and that's where things get even more kind of involved when you're talking about the Mace, you mentioned the Pichardo and the Luciano situation and all of that stuff. We give more details as to the things that we have heard or our opinions and stuff like that. And then we give hard opinions about cigars. And what's even kind of funnier too is if you like a guy and you think a guy's a good dude, you may score that cigar a little bit more, just not because they're giving you money or anything like that, but just because you like the dude. It just happens. You may smoke something more often because you like somebody than someone that's a complete ass. I think that happens a lot in this industry. So media is important. Media is very important. And, a lot of people might be shy about saying specific things, but I'm not shy at all.
Macy, did you have any further questions?
Yeah, I've got some follow-up, a couple of follow-up questions.
I saw too.
First of all, and I also like half. I think half. There's probably not a bigger fan of Half Wheel than myself. I agree. It's a confirmed fact that Charlie's a bit of an ass.
But he's a good guy.
He is a good guy. That's just how he is, and he is smarter than everybody else. Now, he's still only half as smart as he thinks he is, but he is still smarter than everybody else. It's somewhere in between. So, and half as smart as how he thinks he is still really damn smart. So that's 5 times my brain power at least. But Patrick is great. The unsung, the other two, they deserve their credit too. Yeah, my question though is about dominance. It seems to me that CA is not very influential anymore. I can't remember the last time I've actually read Cigar Aficionado. I really don't remember. Right. It used to be what was the movie with Adam Sandler running like Nudie Magazine Day, running to the mailbox. That used to be me with Cigar Aficionado, running there trying and just excited, really cover to cover. Now I can't remember the last time I read it. Now, Cigar Journal, the digital subscription, that's 4 times a year. They're limited in what they can do in that format. Half Wheel is amazing. My question though is they're so dominant. Do you think it is good? I think they are good trustees of their position. I actually think it's remarkable how honorable they are in light of their dominance. But do you think that's good for the industry? And if not, what can be done? Because do you think the industry can really support even like 2 Half Wheels? That's my question. If, let's say someone else started this, put time, effort, staff, and said, we're going to find these stories, these gems, we're going to do video, all this stuff, and really, produce a robust news commentary platform for the cigar industry. Do you think, are they just going to be like, hey, have fun, you spend a couple of years? Because Half Wheel's actually making money. That's the magic, is they are actually making money, and I think they're doing well, and I say they've earned it. I've congratulated Patrick and Nicaragua. They've earned it. Hats off,
Yeah.
just like the Rubens. I'm a cap. They've earned it. Good on them. But do you think the industry, they're so dominant? Do you think that's good for the industry? And is there really much that can be done about it? Do you think there's a way for anyone else to even come in? I know
Sure.
William Cooper talked about going full time. We've got you doing it, but everyone else has got a side gig. I think Half Wheel, the only folks who are actually professional, and that's their jobs, and that's all they do.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a lawyer. I don't have the time. I'm too busy getting sued by Florida scammers. Yeah, I mean, it's hard. But so I guess, what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think that it can be done. I think that the industry could always house another media source. I just don't know of anybody who's willing to make the sacrifice. I think that it's got to be something that you're going to say, okay, I'm not really going to make any money on this for a long time. And you're going to have to keep going and pushing through it and persevering and continuing to establish the resources and, you know, the connections. And it would take a long time. So is it possible? Yes. Is it probable that someone will do that in this industry? It's highly unlikely. You know, I don't think that the cigar consumers themselves are a small percentage of the whole populace, total populace, right? So finding a person that would grow and develop something of that magnitude is going to be difficult. Would the industry sustain it? Yes. Because if they have good articles or good perspectives, I would check Half Wheel and them, you know, but I mean, Half Wheel definitely dominates and for a reason, you know, so yeah.
Tracy, thanks for chiming in on that, and Mike, many thanks for your thoughts. It's definitely an interesting segment to look into, and one where I feel there's still plenty of room to grow and evolve. And yeah, so even something that we try to look into every now and then and provide editorial content and provide insights. Macy does some incredible writing work as a guest author on the Light 'em Up World page. But I always think the more the merrier, you know. We need to have great behind the scenes insights and information about what's happening in the industry. So it can only help. Ian, I saw you had a question. Good to see you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. I'm enjoying the conversation. And my brother's in Edgewater. I wish I knew your store. I'd have been over to see you because it's only about 30 miles from you, I think. And I'd love to go over there next time I'm visiting him. Just a sort of question about sort of the industry generally. I mean, we've had Steve Sacker on here, and he's sometimes the most pessimistic person about the industry. What are your sort of thoughts about, you know, the big companies just taking over and the accountants taking over, and you know, where you see the industry going? And the other thought I had was that, you know, a lot of cigar consumers, certainly over on this side of the, you know, I'm in England, you know, they don't even know. I mentioned Half Wheel to people and they've never heard of them, you know, right. And they aren't reading cigar blogs and they just enjoy their cigars and they're happy with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, you know. Well, the problem, here's the thing, when you build a brand, the real question is, what's really your end game? You know, if you're going to go all the way down and take it to a point where you know, develop heritage and family and growing tobacco and kind of running things, then yeah, you could potentially take your brand to the next level. The reality is that, I mean, where does Powstania end for me? What happens when I die? You know, do I want my kids to take this over? No, I don't want them to take this over at all. I want them to do what they want to do, you know? So, and I want to encourage them to do whatever that is. And I'm gonna tell you right now, the last thing my kids are thinking about is the cigar industry. They're not concerned about that at all, you know? So, you know, I use me as an example, but the reality is that anybody in my size or, you know, even larger that are still small brand owners and manufacturers, you have to have an end game. And if your end game is selling, then you got to sell. you know. I think that that's where most of these companies need to lean towards. There's some pros and cons, you know. The products may change, development may change, you know, marketing may change. There's so many different things, but at the end of the day, look, man, it's a capitalist world. At the end of, you know, money goes to the guys who have the most of it, who continue to build and continue to grow. It's, you know, so it's kind of inevitable. You either dig deep and grow to that extent, or you figure out where your end game is. And I don't think that either one is right or wrong. I just think that it's the process and where you see things going. I mean, I think if I died today, my brand dies. Right now, it's not being picked up. The torch isn't being carried, you know. So I made that joke to my brother. I was walking away. I was like, you better be the first to go, because if I go first, you got a mess to deal with. So, well, that's the reality, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mike, I'm thoroughly enjoying our conversation today, and many thanks for all the great insights that you share with us and all your thoughts. Before we wrap things up, I want to take a little look into the crystal ball, as we always say, and look ahead a little bit. When it comes to cigar retail, but the industry in general, what's your thoughts for the next 12 months, or at least towards the end of the year? Are you bullish, bearish for what's happening in the industry? What's kind of the vibe that you're feeling when you're at the store, or when you're out there, when you're meeting with other manufacturers and retailers? What's your thoughts on the next couple of months ahead?
Here's what's fascinating about being a cigar retailer. I honestly think that we are really on the cusp of experiencing what the economy kind of looks like for the upcoming 90 days, right? When COVID hit and everybody thought the world was going to end, everybody bought cigars. It was crazy. You know, you're like, oh my God, this is insane. And for me personally, like, we looked at our finances. We looked at, you know, what was in the bank, what was in resources and assets, and how long could we afford to keep the doors closed and still pay everybody, right? This was before anything else happened, before, you know, EIDL loans and PPPs and all this other stuff. It's like, what could we do to make sure that everybody's going to be okay? And then where do we officially say, all right, we're bankrupt, it's done, it's over, we did everything we could. And then remarkably, the opposite happened, right? And then you experience this boom for 2 years, right? And then it kind of tapered off at the end of 2022. 2023 started off kind of in the same realm. January was still significantly higher in growth for development, where people are already starting to say, well, there might be a recession, right? February was about a break even, right? And now March, you're starting to see that dip. You're not seeing the consumers come around as much. You're not seeing, you know, you're seeing that people are starting to pull back. People are a little bit more nervous. So what's crazy about this industry is that, you know, cigar guys, we all have cigars. We don't need to buy more today. We have plenty to smoke, you know. We just might want to smoke what's new, you know, or get a few more things, or come out and have a good time. But I think that number is going to be less for at least a quarter or two. I think that you're going to see some pullback in your consumer basis, you know, until some of the market uncertainty changes and some of the prices for things kind of start to alleviate, you know. So I think that's where you're really going to see the cigar industry. You're going to see a little bit of a pullback, probably about 10 or 15%, rough numbers, right? But it'll come back. It always does, you know, as long as it's not regulated to a point where we're no longer letting people smoke at, you know, putting out age restrictions of, okay, if you're born in this year, you'll never be permitted to smoke tobacco. That can't happen. You know, if that happens, then this industry is doomed.
Well, indeed, there we see some sad stuff internationally, and we can only do our very best as avid cigar lovers to be more vocal and to try and fight for our rights, stand up for our rights, and give a little pushback there and voice our opinions.
I think the bigger aspect is to really kind of educate consumers on what it is and what we do. You know, what's remarkable to me is whenever I see somebody win a game with championship, Super Bowl, World Series, whatever, what do we see? We see the guys in the locker rooms with champagne and cigars, right? Those guys are athletes. They take care of themselves. They take care of their bodies, but they can smoke cigars, right? I mean, I take pretty good care of myself. I work out a lot. You know, I consider I try and eat healthy, but I really like food. So, you know, there's that constant problem, but I'm constantly taking a look at my blood, making sure that my cholesterol levels are good, making sure that everything kind of checks out, because I don't want to die anytime soon. I want to do everything I possibly can to be here as long as possible for my kids. Right. So the more that you educate, not just cigar consumers, but people in general, that, hey, look, you know, the McDonald's burger that you ate is far worse than the cigar that I'm smoking. And that, you know, we're not the demon, like that's where it really needs to change. You need to convince the entire culture that cigars are acceptable. And until you do that, then our head's always going to be on the chopping block. You don't have to like cigars. You don't have to partake in cigars. You just have to understand that it isn't as demonized as it is. You know, it's just that simple.
Excellent point. Mace, I saw your hand shoot up there.
Reinhard, hey, thanks for having me, brother. Great show as usual. Mike, great to meet you. Been an absolutely amazing show. So it's really been sort of interesting getting a retailer's perspective. And I had a couple of questions, I guess, and it's kind of on your last few points there. One is that you kind of I guess there's three questions, right? So just bear with me here.
I got you.
Looking at sort of your history and sort of your family roots and everything from Poland. And it's interesting that you mentioned that for you, it's like, it's fair enough. You're not going to push your kids into it, do what they want to do. Absolutely brilliant. But it's interesting that you say you're not interested, or you're not trying to push that. What happens beyond me? It's like, fine, if it dies, it dies. And it's the reason I'm sort of pulling at that is Poland isn't known for cigars, right? So it's like, you're kind of an outlier. I saw your surname and I'm like, I hadn't come across you before. So I'm always on Reinhard's show and I'm always out here. So it was like, all right, what's this guy doing in the cigar industry? So that was really cool. That was really cool and really different. So I just wanted to get your take. That's like the first question, is just, why aren't you kind of interested in seeing that longevity and potentially growing that, or potentially, having more of that influence and getting more people involved and sort of, carrying on your name? Is there a particular reason? Or are you kind of just like, hey, I did this for me, I'm done, it's over?
I don't really value me, is the reality. And I really don't give a shit about me. I care about my kids. I care about my wife. I care about their dreams. Everything that I kind of do is just kind of happened. And when an opportunity presents itself, I build off of it. So it's just really that simple for me. If one day my kid woke up and he's getting older and he's like, Dad, I love everything you do and I want to be a part of it. Okay, great. Then let's do it. Or if someone comes along and my kids aren't interested and they say, hey, we want to carry the torch and teach me what you do and I want to take care of these things and I want to build it with you or build it after you go, then great. But I don't have this desire to create a legacy for my name. I just don't care enough about it. I care enough about them. And, if my kid wants to be a football player, then I'm gonna do everything I can to make him a football player. I'll give him, access to the right trainers for him to understand the right nutrition. If my kid wants to be a Fortnite phenom, then I'm going to do everything I can to put him in touch with those people. I don't have to love what he wants to do. I just have to be able to provide as much as I possibly can, the resources, so that he can understand, right? And I want them to understand that no matter what you do, you better work your ass off, right? Because if not, someone's going to take your lunch. It's just that simple, So that's really kind of where it ends for me. The basis and the primary is them.
Great answer. Great answer. Appreciate that. And that's just great to get that insight as to sort of where you're seeing it. Because a lot of people, of course, especially in this industry, it's always about carrying on that family line. And, people always want to push their kids into it. And, you never kind of know the backstory as to how much of an influence they are having on their kids getting involved in the industry. But it's great to see that. So great answer. And yeah, I appreciate that a lot. I guess the second question is it's a two-parter. So it's kind of when, as a retailer, so I started smoking and I'm in England, so it was mainly Cubans initially, and then got put onto New World. So I've kind of moved over, and now it's interesting that like my Cuban collection is kind of just sat there because they're better with age. So I wanted to get your take on the guys that you see, your frequent customers in the New World. How many people are buying cigars to kind of hold on to because they might get better, or they want to age them? Is that something that you see a lot, or is it, because I know you mentioned the three kind of categories of customers, right? I just wonder, is there a category in there where you got people coming in, they want to buy that box, or they want to buy two boxes because one is just going to be for, I'm going to have this in a few years' time. Do you see that quite a lot?
Sure. I mean, I wouldn't say quite a lot, but you have your guys that have remarkable collections, right? Especially when something new comes out, or something that intrigues them. What they'll normally do is they'll buy one or two for them to smoke, or maybe a 5-pack, and then they'll buy a box that they keep sealed and tuck it away forever. As much as I love that consumer, because that consumer buys more than your average consumer, I also look at that consumer and say, look, one day you're going to die. Somebody's going to look at your cigar collection and say, nah, and just throw them all out. Right. So you need to smoke these things, and enjoy these. I joke with my partner on the podcast all the time, Mike Palmer. He's like, I have this little collection of really rare cigars, and I'm like, I can't wait to get them when you're dead. I'm gonna smoke them all within that week. I am not hanging on to any of them. A cigar that's when they're aged, things sometimes they get better, sometimes they don't. But I guess the harsh reality is that tomorrow is not guaranteed to any of us. So when people always ask me, where's your secret stash? I'm like, there isn't a secret stash. I don't know. Believe me, if I had it and you wanted it, it's sold. I'm not, I'm a retailer. I'm in it for, to grow and make money and provide, I'm not housing anything. I ran into our first creation was a SBC 16 for a limited edition. It was called Surrounded by Champions.
Yep.
Right. So I started clearing out and organizing my back humidor, my wholesale humidor for our next allocation, because the Connecticut that Mace has that I've only had a handful of. So enjoy that one, bro, because I don't have any more right now. Like those things are coming soon. Right. So I started rearranging my humidor, and I found these bundles of SBCs. I'm like, holy shit, man, what are these doing here? So what did I do? I said, look, I reached out to all my retailers and said, here's a package deal. If you take this package deal, I'm going to give you these SBCs. Let's go ahead and do what you want with them. Right. Wow. And, it helps me make sure that the core line is in their spot, that it has all the vitolas that I want, or at least enough where there's a presence in the humidor. And in turn, I'm also giving them, one of the most highly sought after cigars that I'm ever produced. So I don't keep it. I just don't keep it,
Gotcha. Great answer. Final question, and then I'll let you go is, and it's a topic that sort of came up. You touched on it very briefly, and it's around just regulations, right? Just government influence and stuff. And it's kind of gone silent a little bit. It's been interesting the last few months. There hasn't been a whole lot of talk. I just wanted to get your take on where, coming back to what Reinhard was saying in the future, looking at that crystal ball, what do you see as going on? Are we seeing sort of more influence from the leaf enthusiasts actually getting involved more in the politics and being able to influence government and saying, actually, hold up? Or do you think there's still a huge battle to fight? What's your take on that, sort of just where the government influence stands? And I know it's different by state, but just as a whole, especially in that market, what's your take on the government?
I think the government is always going to look to regulate. Being in this industry as a retailer for 13 years, I've heard the worst of horror stories day in and day out, so much to a point where, if you're a smaller guy, you're like, man, maybe I should get out of this. So like I should cut and run for the hills, you know. They're focusing on right now mainly infused cigars, and you know, that could definitely hurt as far as, you know, people that are just getting into the cigar industry, you know. And I said earlier in the podcast that my first cigar was Cuba Cuba, you know, because it was sweet. I wanted to try that. And then I instantly landed into something extremely full body and I almost died. So you know, trying to take that away is what they're really aiming at. Will they succeed? Who knows? You know, the reality is if they don't succeed today, they're going to try again tomorrow. And they're never going to let up. So I mean, you look at what some of the things that Canada has to deal with covered packaging and taxation and all of these things that are just absolutely insane. And it really makes no sense to me. I don't, you know, I'm just a small retailer. I don't fully understand the concept of taxation, but it just doesn't, that's the whole concept doesn't really, if they print the money, they hit the button and they just make it. Why are they taking it out of the industry for something else? I just don't understand that, you know. And that maybe just be a simple, like looking at it at too small of a level, but the reality is that I don't understand it. I've never seen a guy smoke a cigar and then drive into somebody else and kill an entire family. Never, you know.
That's true. Just on that point, I guess just a final bit is just out of interest from a retailer perspective in terms of what you see selling the most. Do you see a lot, well, before the bans and stuff, did you see a lot, where did you see the most predominant sales taking place from your perspective in terms of infused and just, you know, pure tobacco, as I would call it, but what's your breakdown?
Well, so we're in kind of a blue collar town. So I would say that, you know, there's definitely a need for infused cigars. A lot of consumers will start with that, you know, so we will always carry them. You know, I think that the bread and butter for a lot of retail shops are actually these bundles, are actually these, you know, the lower value, or, you know, the lower cost, higher value bundle packs that, you know, you see your older, your 55 plus consumers you normally smoking.
Wow.
So the sad part is that all of it's important. All of it is super important. You can't, you know, if you're in a town that's, you know, blue collar or middle class, you need every aspect to work. You need every part of that humidor to produce money. Because if it's just dead space and it's not producing money, you're gonna start treading water really quickly. I mean, you know, we look at the numbers every day. I look at the numbers every day, and I can tell you the dips, and I compare them from last year to this year, and you know, look at the events and see what hit and what didn't hit, and you know, what did we do differently, you know, all of those things. So I could tell you that if I had to pull infused cigars out of my humidor, it would hurt me huge. I would probably have to fire employees.
Wow.
You know, and if I have to fire employees, that means I'm working behind the register. And if I'm working behind the register, now I'm no longer growing.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Great answer. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate it. And yeah, great meeting you tonight.
My pleasure, man. Thank you.
LA County outlawed infused cigars in the retail stores.
Yeah, man. You know, you guys are you're in a totally different world over there. I don't, you know, don't you have to have like an electric lawnmower too or some shit or some other stuff? And
it depends on the city, but yeah, sometimes they can't use no gas leaf blowers. Only not in my neighborhood. They use the gas leaf blowers, but in some places only electric. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in Florida. It's the polar opposite. Like I joke, I call it the lawless swamp. You know, we never had COVID. I don't know what that is. We were closed momentarily for a brief moment, and you know, I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Not even Texas. I like Florida the best. Florida is by far the best.
Finish on a high note, most certainly. Great questions from all you guys. Dejan, yeah, I would love to have you ask the last question for tonight. Mike, obviously we want to be respectful of time as well, and I so greatly appreciate your patience and staying with us for a long time. It's been a tremendous show. Dejan, poor guy, you look like you're freezing your ass off.
No,
I
it's
see
not
cold
that cold.
Vienna,
It's not that cold.
but
It's in Vienna today. I don't even have gloves, you know. It's super
well,
nice.
it's time for spring to arrive, buddy.
Exactly.
I'm with you.
Exactly. So my question is gonna be real short. It concerns the last question from Mars. It's like about the legislations. I don't know how hard it is in USA. I just wanted to say the question is for both, for Reinhard and for Mike. It's what is this gonna go to? Because I saw on the news today, 2 hours ago, on the news in Slovenia, the plan of the government is that by 2040 we are tobacco-free country, and I know for sure that if this is happening in Slovenia, it's tobacco-free country. I'm sure this is gonna be in Austria immediately. I mean, this is for 100% sure. And I was shocked. It's just like it's by 2040, and this is the official plan. This is it. We are tobacco-free. And I don't know, because when they were explaining like mostly about cigarettes, you know, but they throw everything in the same basket. So it's tobacco.
Mhm.
And Reinhard said we should do something. Also Mike says like this, but what can you do? And this is I'm 100% sure this is gonna be it. You will not be able to smoke outside anywhere in public, anywhere. They will not be selling it tobacco free. You understand? This is by 2040, and that's the legal plan, official plan from the government. This is how it's gonna be, you know. So either Reinhard, Mike, you tell me, where is this going?
Well, personally, I think, you know, you got to look at history. You know, you see what happens with regulation to that level, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. People find a way to do what they want to do, you know. So if you can't stop the regulation, you're not going to stop people from smoking. It's just not happen. It's just not, I just don't see it logically working. But the best thing that we can do is try and educate consumers, educate people, and try our best to make, at least exemplify cigars. You know, I think that that's what we're trying to do in the United States. We're trying to separate from everybody else. You know, even the e-cigarettes and stuff like that. You know, the PCA. We originally had e-cig people in our conventions, and they pushed them out. They didn't want to be part of it, you know. So what's important is that, you know, we work on legislation that says, hey, look, show me the data that tells that the scientific research that says cigar smoking is bad, and to what extent it is bad. The reality is that it doesn't exist. You know, even the FDA made a release that says, I mean, to surmise, it goes, well, there's no proof saying that these things are bad, but, you know, maybe you shouldn't do it anyways. It's like, wait a second, but you just said that it doesn't do anything. So it's important to continue to bring those things to light and to continue to press against that legislation.
Yeah, Reinhard, what do you think? I mean, you are here from Austria, right? And I'm sure you know that when countries go like this in Europe, it's going to be one and then the next, you know, the neighbors first.
That's certainly true, and I think horrible regulations will always be used as a blueprint for other countries to follow suit and try to implement similar regulations. I wholeheartedly agree with Mike, though, and I think history has shown repeatedly that prohibition doesn't work, and people will find its way. And the cigar industry has proven to be incredibly resilient, and I truly hope for this resilience not to be tested all too much, but to be there when we need it, and people will continue to enjoy a premium cigar one way or another.
Can I just
And
ask? Sorry, Reinhard, continue.
No, Mace, please.
I just had a really final one just on that point. And it's also from a retailer perspective, but also Reinhard, from your viewpoint, are we seeing a shift in terms of the Gen Zs, and are we seeing that shift? Are we seeing it as we're actually fighting an uphill battle because of the new generation coming through not smoking? So I don't know, Mike, if you're seeing that difference in terms of your customer demographic, your age demographic, actually it's getting older and older and not younger and younger. Are you kind of seeing that dip? It's kind of an interesting one, because that from this whole fight, this battle that we've got in terms of the legislation, if it's actually the new generation coming up saying, oh, no, we're not putting up with this smoking. How are we seeing that? Because I know it's different in Europe, different in the States, but is that having an influence on it?
I think that your cigar smokers are always a small population, right? There's a small number of people. So I still see young smokers coming in, obviously the appropriate age, 21 plus for the United States. I mean, there's a lot of soft individuals in the younger generations, there's, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how to cut that, they're okay with smoking batteries and all this other shit, but I think some of those guys are still cigar smokers, and I still see that. I don't think that that's going to go away. What's more important again is to educate everybody as a whole so that they understand what it is. How you do that, I have no idea.
Gotcha.
I do. Can I jump in on that real quick? I know I have an idea. I know the answer. FDA comments. We were saved by Judge Mehta. This is important, people. The PCA submitted a comment. When regulations are proposed, there's a public comment period. These comments have to be looked at and evaluated by the agencies, in this case, the FDA. If the PCA did not submit the public comment that it did on these previous regulations, which the FDA did blow through, we would have substantial equivalence right now. That would mean you can't have new cigars, basically, is what that would mean. It would mean if you do not have a predicate cigar that existed prior to 2016, you can't have it, or you have to go through a process that's so expensive that likely you're never going to get it. So, but for the PCA's, like, why is this guy talking about public boring? Right. You get new cigars today because the PCA did the dirty work and saved our assets. They don't get the respect. They saved our assets, people. We would not have new cigars in the United States but for what they've done. So first of all, thank you, Premium Cigar Association. Thank you very much. You kick ass. You saved our industry. You need to be funded. The litigation needs to be funded. There is right now on the cigar factories, this affects me. It affects you, Mike, with what you do, a small factory. I will tell you what you can do. I posted it. I will repost it. There is a period. There is a public comment hearing. It's scheduled all day, April 12th, 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern time. It's online. It is on the new regulations on regulating cigar factories that have just came through. Go to Half Wheel, read about it. It's really bad news, really bad news. Send an email to ctpoutreach@fda. I will post this again, ctpoutreach@fda.hhs.gov. Request to participate in this hearing. They have to let you do it. Speak at the hearing. Say you're opposed to these regulations. Say why. Say you want to start a brand and it's going to kill small factories. It's not going to help anything. It's solving a problem that doesn't exist, and it's going to really hurt the industry, and the cost benefit analysis is crazy. Or I'm a consumer and I like new cigars. I like boutique cigars. And FDA, if you pass this rule, no one's going to be made more safe. The stuff's not going to children, and you're going to kill my ability to get these new cigars, small boutique cigars like Mike's cigar. And I really like these. So please don't pass this rule. So, we talk about education. I'm sorry to say I'm educating, right? This is specifically what needs to be done. So I put the email address in the chat box right now. And if you don't do it, then just stop complaining. And if you lose your cigars, I don't think you have a right to complain. I will be at this hearing, and they will hear from me. And
that's in the States.
Real and PCA, I'm with you. Joshua Huberski, I CC'd you on my email. This is getting real, and I'm joining this fight, and it's fucking getting real. And thank you.
There you go. We need
Preach
more
it.
Preach, Macy, preach.
And indeed, I can only second Macy's thought and comment. That's where people need to stand up and raise their voices. And I feel an obligation for every cigar enthusiast to make themselves heard, share their opinion, stand up and fight for their rights, because it's just not enough to sit here, smoke a cigar, complain about all the dooming regulations, and then be like, well, somebody else will probably take care of it. So I can only second that thought. And please, all you enthusiastic cigar lovers, make yourselves heard and stand up for what you believe in and what you enjoy. Mike, well, a lot of regulatory talks and some of the more some of the heavier topics towards the end. Regardless, it was such a pleasure to have you on the show. I feel a very lighthearted one, a very entertaining one, but truly and superbly informative one. It was a real pleasure to have you with us, and I can only thank you from heart for everything that you shared with us. It's fascinating to see and to hear from all your experiences throughout the entire supply chain and all these various elements of the industry. I can really feel and appreciate how you have a holistic 360 degree perspective on the cigar industry, and that is something very special. And I think more people should try and get a better grasp of like all the intricacies and those various moving parts in the cigar industry. So many thanks.
Thanks so much for having me, man. I appreciate you having me come on.
Mike, all the very best for you. Continued success for the business. Regards to the family. And yeah, I very much look forward to sharing a cigar with you in person soon. I hope to see you at the trade show in July.
Be there.
Yeah, keep it up. Continue what you're doing. It is greatly appreciated and it means a lot.
Appreciate it, brother.
To everybody joining us today, thank you so much for watching. Please chime back in, join us again next week. We'll be back same time, same station, even though for everybody in the US, we're back on track with our normal 2 p.m. Eastern time slot. So I'll see you again next week. Until then, light 'em up, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Goodbye and good night. Ciao, ciao.
Good night.